Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we're going to be talking about how to begin correcting a diastasis recti. I'm Robin, and I work for the Gentle Birth Project and the Center for Women's Fitness. I'm really excited that you're here tonight. You'll be hearing from Carolyne Anthony, who is the founder of the Gentle Birth Project and the Center for Women's Fitness and the founder of International Diastasis Recti Month. She is an incredible women's health expert who has been helping women care for their core for over 20 years. And she is joined by Goldie McBride, who is part of an incredible practice of midwives. The Stony Brook Midwives based in on Long Island. So she's going to be moderating Carolyne tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to you guys now.
Okay, thank you. Goldie, do you want to start?
Great, thank you. As she said, I'm one of the midwives in the Stony Brook practice, and I'm so happy to have Carolyne here tonight. So would you like to tell us a little bit about what you do, how you got started in it, and give us the goods?
Oh, for sure. So my journey into women's health came out of pure frustration. So when I became pregnant with my first daughter way back in 1987, I was at that time a professional ballet dancer, as well as a Pilates instructor and a fitness instructor. That was my side income in case I didn't have a job dancing. And I thought that I knew my body really well. And of course, when I got pregnant, there wasn't anywhere to go where someone could tell me what was safe for me to do while I was pregnant. So I basically sat down for the 9 months of my first daughter's pregnancy. And because I did that, my postpartum journey was incredibly hard. So when I had my second daughter, I started to gather some information, trying to figure out what I could do to help my body and maybe not be, dancing 6 hours or whatever. And I also knew that I wanted my birth to be very different from my first birth, which was completely medicated, not my choice. I wanted to be more in control over the next birth, but of course, I still didn't have any information. So I went into that natural birth with no medication and stuff, and I was just like, oh my God, why didn't anybody tell me this is what it was going to be like? But my postpartum period with my second daughter was far better than the first one because I had obviously a little bit more information about how to be pregnant. But I accidentally got pregnant for the third time with my third daughter. And when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, okay, this time I'm going to do it right. I'm going to gather enough information. I'm going to figure out my body. I'm going to see what it means to actually be female, my female hormones, my female anatomy, and try and discover all this information about not just the pregnancy, but the birth itself. And then most definitely, how do I recover afterwards? So that's how I started in this. I did an about change from being this professional dancer to all of a sudden being an advocate for women. And that journey took me into becoming a birth and postpartum doula. And then I studied a lot more anatomy and physiology of the female body. And then through the course of the years, I've also added a lot of fascial information as well. There's so much research on the fascial system. I became very, very interested in diastasis recti around about 1996, when one of my clients came in and showed me her tummy. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. So since then, I've been really trying to find the information about diastasis recti. Back in those days, there really wasn't anything out there. I didn't even know there was a name for what I was looking at. So this is really a pet project of mine. I've been working on it consistently for over 25 years. I've been doing lots and lots of research, but most importantly, whatever I'm putting together and working on with my clients, I'm seeing results. And so I'm really excited to be in this position right now where I feel like I have something to offer that's really concrete. And I have a step-by-step program that shows you the techniques that are becoming that are very successful with everybody. So I think the important part of this whole thing is that the techniques seem to be working right across the board, not just for women, but for men and for anybody else who has a diastasis recti. So I really feel like I'm getting to the crux of the matter, and I'm figuring out this injury to the body and what causes it, not necessarily just from that female pregnant postpartum standpoint. So that's the last 30 years in a nutshell for you. You're muted, Goldie, in case you're asking me a question.
Sorry, I was trying to keep things quiet in case someone else came in the room here.
That's okay.
So, so we have some questions that we want to ask you. And so what exactly is a diastasis recti and how common is it?
Well, a literal translation of diastasis recti is taking the word diastasis, which means separation, and then taking the word recti, which is your rectus abdominis muscles. And those are the muscles that run vertical from the bottom of your rib cage to the top of your pubic bone. And we're looking at this purely muscular condition. If you're talking about diastasis recti, then it becomes just a muscular condition. And we're looking at those muscles separating for whatever reason. How common is it? Well, I think this is where we don't really know, because back in the day, we didn't have much information about it. So I think a lot of people didn't realize they had it. But we're becoming more familiar with it. We're becoming more aware of it. And so it seems to be that it's a lot more common now. In my opinion, just from working with this condition for so long, I think it is becoming more prevalent now. And there are certain reasons, in my opinion, behind that as to why we're seeing more and more of it. But also, I think it's because we're becoming more aware that it seems to be more common. But we're also tending to pull away from looking at diastasis recti from a purely muscular standpoint. Now that we have so much more research done in the fascial, on the fascial system, we're realizing the connection between what's happening through your fascial system. We're then connecting it through to your breath. We're connecting it to your stress levels. So more than just this muscular condition, now we're understanding that DR is a symptom of a dysfunction through your whole body over time, and that pregnancy can exacerbate that. Pregnancy can be a tipping point for your body that will cause the fascia through that midline to give because of the pressure behind it. And then we see a diastasis recti. But it's not necessarily because you're pregnant that you get this, because anybody can get a DR.
Okay. And so what are the symptoms to look for?
I think the main thing that you're looking at to diagnose it, if you wish to use that word, is to look at the stomach and see what's happening to it, but whether you're pregnant or not. So if you're in an exercise class, and I just want to emphasize that anybody can get a DR, but it's mostly people who exercise who realize they have a DR because they're so much more aware of what's happening to their bodies on a daily basis. So you'll normally find that somebody's in a class, they're doing an abdominal crunch, and they're looking at their stomach and wondering what the heck is going on. And for a person who's not postpartum, normally what will happen is that as you come up into your crunch, you'll see a doming effect in your abdominals. So that is the pressure, the intra-abdominal pressure, pushing up against the fascia that has weakened. And that's your internal organs pushing through the gap and coming up into a dome. And that's when people freak out. And that's when people say, well, it must be because I'm doing crunches. And so the first line of defense is to say, well, we shouldn't be doing crunches when we have a diastasis, which really doesn't solve the problem at all because you're not getting to the root cause. Now, the other way to look at a diastasis is with a postpartum woman who now doesn't have all of that intra-abdominal pressure when she's postpartum because her body is still in that state of laxity. And so what's going to happen with her fascia and her skin and her muscles is they're going to drop into the gap. So for a postpartum woman, you're going to check for a diastasis, or you're going to see a diastasis just by looking at her. If she's lying on her back on the floor, you can literally see a gap where the fascia is sinking into the gap. So there's different ways of looking at this. A lot of people think that crinkly skin and wrinkly skin and loose skin is an indication of diastasis recti, but it really isn't. So you do have to have a proper diagnosis, and people who can give you that diagnosis are obviously going to be people in the physical therapy world and stuff like that. I mean, movement specialists can then do something about it if they have that diagnosis.
Okay, thank you. So how can we check ourselves for diastasis recti? Can we do an exam on ourselves?
Yeah, you totally can. And again, depending on whether you're postpartum or not. So postpartum is where you're really going to do what you see online, is where everybody's checking themselves by putting their fingers in their belly button. That's really a postpartum diagnosis, because as I said just now, that's when there really is a gap that is loose and empty behind the fascia. So when you're postpartum, you're going to take 2 fingers and place them around your belly button. And the reason for that is that your rectus abdominis muscles have a natural curvature around your belly button. There's going to be a gap there anyway. And just for some of the people watching here, if you're in the fitness industry, a 1-finger gap is normal. It doesn't mean you have a diastasis recti. That is just that normal curvature of those muscles around the umbilicus. So what you're going to do, because that's considered the weakest point, you're going to actually test around that area. So that would be the first step. You would put 2 fingers on around your belly button. You'd come up you'd just lift your head and shoulders off the floor. You don't want to muscle it, because as soon as you use your muscles to come up, there is a likelihood of the gap closing because you're connecting the muscles. So you really just want to try and just lift your head and shoulders off and see whether your fingers dip down into the gap. And then there's a way of measuring it. You can measure 2 fingers, 3 fingers, 4 fingers, depending on the size of your diastasis. 1 finger is not even in there. It's not a diastasis. 2 fingers is normal postpartum. 3 fingers is also on the normal side if you're early postpartum. But if you're getting to 3 or 4 fingers, then I would say that you want to start doing some rehabilitative exercises to start reconnecting that. And we have developed techniques for that, especially for the postpartum woman. But understanding postpartum, that your body is already still in that more supple stage. And if you're breastfeeding, you're not going to recover quite as fast as somebody who's not. Now, if you're not postpartum and you're not pregnant, and maybe you're a guy with a beer gut and you have a diastasis recti, because that simulates pregnancy, right? So it's the same concept, the way you've got that intra-abdominal pressure behind the fascial line through your midline. You're going to be able to check yourself to see if you have that same thing. You're lying on your back, you're just going to bring your head and shoulders up. And then if you have a diastasis recti, just from lifting your head and shoulders up is going to create enough intra-abdominal pressure to push everything up through the gap. And that's when you're going to see a doming effect. And then you'll know that something's going on. Perhaps you need to get yourself to someone who give you a diagnosis.
So another question. So when they're checking themselves, should they only check around the belly button, or should they go higher and lower, above and below the belly button? Like, is that any indication of, is it worse or is it better, or does that matter?
No, it does matter. And that's a really good question. So I always start by the belly button, as I just said, because that's the weakest link. But if there's a little feeling of something going on, then yes, I would definitely check above and below. So then I always check below. So if I'm checking for a postpartum client, for instance, I will always check below, and then I would also ask if there was a C-section, because a C-section can be a cause of a diastasis. And that would also be in the lower part of the abdominals as well. But yes, I would go a little bit higher and check right through there. There are people who have a diastasis right from the bottom of the rib cage all the way through to the top of the pubic bone. And that's really quite intense. And that really does need to have specialized care, not just your regular exercise program, that you really need to go and see somebody who can take care of you. That could also indicate surgery as well. But yes, I would definitely check all the way through. What I would also be aware of is that a diastasis recti does show very differently from having a hernia. So you can sometimes have an umbilical hernia, and hernias usually present or show as a circular protrusion. So if you've got a belly button and every time you come up, you see this protrusion, it's quite likely that you have a hernia and not necessarily a diastasis recti. Though I do want to say that with what I'm discovering with some of the techniques I'm using, because I use a lot of myofascial release, hernias and diastasis recti are fascial conditions. And we're finding with our techniques that once we start working with that fascial system, a lot of times we're actually healing those hernias as well. The other thing I want you to be aware of is if you have a little bit of a gap higher up around your tummy area and it's a circular, that also could be a hernia. That might be an epigastric hernia. These hernias need to be looked at by a professional, by a medical professional. They are a little bit different from trying to rehabilitate a diastasis through movement and breath and fascial release. So always err on the side of caution. If you are worried about something, please go and see your healthcare provider. I come into this whole diastasis recti rehabilitation from a fascial and movement standpoint. So I just want you to be aware of what, the things I'm talking about are going to be coming from that viewpoint.
So I think I have a question that some people may be asking. So I come from a background of physical therapy prior to being a midwife. And so myofascial release was kind of a new technique we were learning about 20 years ago.
Yes.
But I think there may be some people on the call that really don't know what myofascial release is. Like, what is the myofascia? I'm not sure. Like, is there a quick answer to that?
I can try and answer that. I think maybe coming from a movement background might be a little bit simpler to put it into the language that people will understand. So what we used to think about when, let me rephrase all of that. So coming from the movement background, we're always thinking along the lines of a musculoskeletal system, right? So we're looking at the muscles, we're looking at the bones. And it wasn't until about the early 2000s, you probably did it earlier than we did in the movement field, where we started to look at the fascia and how it was connected to all of these other body systems. And I think I came to figuring out the fascial part of it with DR quite by accident, but that's how it always happens, right? It's like, oh my God, look at that. But tissue that connects everything in our body. I'm a John Barnes practitioner, and while I've done a lot of studying with other people in the fascial field, like Robert Schleip and Carla Stecco and all of these people doing all of this amazing research, I'm also very much a holistic person. And so John Barnes, and I'm sure you know him as a physical therapist, his work really resonated with me. And when it comes to me building programs, I have to really believe in what I'm doing. And I really believe in his work. And so looking at John Barnes's way of looking at the fascial system, it's one continuous web. And I think Gil Headley, who's also doing a lot of dissections and stuff, he's actually dissected a human body, just the fascial web, and he calls it the wedding dress. So he's taken, you have to look this up, Gil Headley, he's totally amazing. So he's dissected, he tries to use fresh cadavers as well, or cadavers. Different countries pronounce it differently. So he's taken a fresh cadaver and he's taken the fascial web and very slowly removed it from the rest of the body and laid it on a table, and it looks like a wedding dress. It's truly amazing. But when you see something like that, you'll understand more and more about how you can't isolate one part. So if we're talking about a DR, for instance, and when I first started working with it, I was so concentrated on it just being the rectus muscles, and I wanted to try and get the rectus muscles back, and I was trying all of these techniques, pull those muscles back, pull those muscles back. And now, of course, I've come to a point with a lot of the fascial, I'll get back to your question, I do this, I go off on a tangent. we're understanding how it's so much more than just a muscular condition. But coming back to fascia, so fascia is the connective tissue that holds everything together. It encases everything in your body, from your bones to your internal organs to every cell in your body. And if you're coming from a movement background, if you're on this call and you're a movement person, you can't, it surrounds all your muscles, and it doesn't just surround the whole muscle, it surrounds every single muscle fiber. So when you're looking at a condition that's now becoming known as a fascial condition, a DR is becoming known as that, you've got to understand how that impacts the muscles. So for me, with a DR, when I look at it now, I'm looking at that fascial system. So you have a line up the front of your body. So another person in the fascial world called Thomas Myers, he has all these fascial lines. And one of his lines is that deep front line that comes up behind the rectus muscles. And it comes, according to Thomas Myers, into the chest area. And then he has another line up the back. And I know I had a point to all of this, but I completely missed my point here, but we used to look at the fascia becomes more important because I'm going to stop, take a breath. It's getting late at night. I'm going to come back into this. So we're talking about looking at it from other than a muscular standpoint. So when you're looking at a diastasis recti and you've got those muscles pulling apart, something has to be happening to pull those muscles apart. And so when I started building my program and with the techniques I'm using and the results I'm seeing with my program, then I'm understanding that it's fascial restrictions through somewhere else in the body, not necessarily in the abdominal area, that is slowly causing that dysfunction. It's creating the environment for that tipping point to happen, for that fascia to give, and for those muscles to come apart. And then you can't bring those muscles back together again until you find where that restriction is and release the restriction. Then it allows everything in your body to come back into alignment, not just your muscles, but your bones as well. And everything can then drop back into alignment. And only after that has happened can you start to restore the body. So we're looking at, if we look at the anatomy of your core and looking at the diastasis recti, everything in your core, all of your abdominal muscles are encased in this one sheet of fascia. And so if you're looking at your rectus abdominis muscles coming apart, then you're going to understand that because it's encased in, all of the other muscles are encased in that same fascial sheet, all of those other muscles are going to be dysfunctional. And when all those muscles are dysfunctional, you can't strengthen anything. You can't rehabilitate something until you take care of the fascial system. Okay, so one of the first things we do with the program I've developed is we do that release of the fascia. So we have a little tagline. It's called First You Relax, because if you are trying to release fascia and you're still in that very tense state, if you're in your fight or flight or your freeze mode, which most of us are in, nowadays, then you're not going to be able to release the fascia optimally. So we first go through a whole relaxation, then we start releasing the fascial system. And we do this not necessarily by doing anything hands-on, because I'm not licensed to do that. So I've developed techniques that somebody can do for themselves. And that includes a lot of rocking movements, that includes a little bit of pressure for some balls. But the objective there is to release the fascia. And we don't know where your fascia is restricted, right? So what we do is we have a guideline, we have a sequence of releases that is going to start releasing, because it's all one fascial sheet. If you're releasing one part of your body, it's then eventually going to release through the whole body. And so it doesn't really matter where that restriction is. What matters is you're getting to the releasing of your whole body. Once you start getting into that releasing, then you can start realigning. So you want to start coaxing your body back into alignment. And with a DR, we're starting to learn how to reconnect your pelvic floor muscles to your abdominal muscles and start to realign. You can't start restoring and strengthening until you've got all of these steps in place. And then once you feel like you're in a better alignment, then we start adding exercises that will start to strengthen the muscles that have been realigned. And then from there, once you start seeing some results, you can then start progressing your exercise program back to where you normally are, because that's what we want you to do. We want you to be up and functioning again. We don't want you to be always thinking, oh, I've got a diastasis recti, so I can't do X, Y, and Z. You should be able to do everything that you normally do. You just have to learn how to do it correctly again, because you've created this dysfunction in your body over time. And like I said right at the beginning, whatever that tipping point was, and for your client base here with the pregnancy and postpartum, the tipping point has been pregnancy or postpartum, you know, carrying babies. So we have to step away from blaming a certain condition and blaming it for creating the diastasis when you've been creating an environment for that to happen over time. So we have to step back and look at a bigger picture here, looking at all the different systems of the body, from your breath, through your bones, from your fascial system, your muscular system, and create a whole body solution to the problem.
Okay. And so my next thought is that, can we prevent it? You know, while we're pregnant, if we're not pregnant, if you're a man with a beer belly, how do we prevent it?
I think you can prevent it. I've had pregnant clients come to me, and I don't want to bash anybody's modality here, but I've had a lot of women come in who have come from CrossFit. And while I think you can do whatever makes you happy, I think what you have to have is enough information about your own body and how it works to be able to prevent things like pelvic floor dysfunction, and you know, abdominal stuff happening as well. Can you prevent it? Yes, I think you can, by being aware of how you're using your body. So a lot of times what we're doing is we're bracing instead of connecting muscles, especially during pregnancy. You're tending to brace because you're not quite sure where you are in space anymore, and your body is changing. But I think understanding that if you can just relax into that new posture that you have, that you'll be able to work your body a little bit more functional. Learning how to disconnect at a deeper level, learning how to use your breath, learning how to let your muscles relax a little bit more before you connect them. It goes a long way in preventing a condition that is caused a lot by that bracing effect, by the huge breaths and the exhalations that are forced exhalations. So I think if we all just calm down a little bit and understand that our bodies know how to move, and that we should let them move first, and then if we have a problem, then try and fix it, if that makes any sense to you.
Okay. And so let's say we are somebody who wants to prevent it, or has an early, already we diagnosed ourselves, we think we have a diastasis recti. So what exercises should we be doing, or how do we find you? Should we go to you? Or should we, you know, find a good physical therapist, trainer? Who should we go to?
Well, I'd like to say that if you're going into an exercise class, then try and find people who are certified in my method. Of course, I'm going to say that. I do have, if you're having a hard time finding teachers, I do have 3,000 teachers in 41 countries. So someone somewhere is going to be able to help you. I always work with physical therapists. I'm always referring out, they refer to me. So it's a continual collaboration between the two industries. I think that's very important. But there is, you know, it's not difficult to learn how to prevent something. It really is a re-education about how you're using your body. And just to give you an idea of how simple it is. So my whole philosophy with teaching people how to move is I've got to make it simple enough that people understand how to do it. And so what I would like to do for you here is to give you just a little breathing exercise that usually when I'm teaching, I don't tell people why I'm doing until a little bit later, because I want you to feel it more than think about it. But just to explain why I do what I do, number one, the breath is very instrumental in activating both your abdominals and your pelvic floor. I'll be very brief on this. And your pelvic diaphragm, the two parts of your pelvic floor, so your pelvic diaphragm and your respiratory diaphragm mirror each other. So every time you take an inhale, you are actually going to not release and not relax your pelvic floor. Your pelvic floor always has to have some tonicity. It's holding you up. So when you inhale, it's just going to change the musculature of your pelvic floor. And every time you exhale, it's then going to retract or recoil both your respiratory diaphragm and your pelvic floor. Now, that just works normally every day, every time you breathe. So every time you're breathing, you've got a pelvic floor and abdominal exercise going on. Now, if we want to start to become aware of the connections, then we're going to add a little bit more to it. So whoever's online with me now, and Goldie, you can do this with me. So just uncross your legs and sit up nice and tall, wherever you are, on a mat or in your chair, and just try and relax into the chair and focus on your breath pattern, okay? There's no, we're going to inhale into this area, we're going to exhale into that. You're just going to concentrate on your own breath. And when you start to yawn, it means you're starting to release. So I won't take that personally. So just go ahead and relax and start just focusing on your own breath. And as you breathe, just notice where you're breathing into. Nothing's wrong, nothing's right, it's just where you're breathing. And you might notice where you're a little bit tighter, or where you're a little bit looser. Again, nothing's right, nothing's wrong. And then I'm going to add a little bit of a direction here. So right at the bottom of your pelvis, what you're sitting on are two bones called your sit bones. So if you don't have too much padding, you're going to feel those a little bit better than if you do have padding. And let me just say that as women, we should have quite a bit of padding down there. That's normal. So what I want you to do now is just think about those bones. They're called your sit bones. And I want you to gather your breath. And as you inhale, I want you to think about, but not, it's not going to actually happen, but I just want you to send that breath in between the sit bones as you inhale. So you're going to inhale in between the sit bones. On the exhale, you're going to let everything relax first. And at the end of the exhale, you're going to very gently draw those sit bones together. And again, you're going to inhale in between the sit bones. Exhale, let everything relax. And at the end of the exhale, very gently draw the sit bones together and just feel what you're feeling. And one more time, you're going to inhale in between the sit bones. On the exhale, let everything relax. That's really important. You let it go first. Let it come back to its resting position. At the end of the exhale, gently draw the sit bones together. Go ahead, just relax. Focus on your breath, gentle breathing. I'm just going to take a sip of water. Now what I'd like you to focus on are your hip bones. And for those of you who know anatomy a little bit more, that's your ASIS, but just right in front of your body, your hip bones. Place your fingers on top of your hip bones there. And now I just want you to direct your breath in between those hip bones. So you're literally just going to widen your pelvis a little bit. You're going to inhale in between the hip bones. On the exhale, let everything relax. So what's happening here is your transversus is coming back to resting. At the end of the exhale is where you gently narrow your pelvis, drawing those hip bones together. And again, inhale in between the hip bones. Exhale, let everything relax. And at the end of the exhale, very gently draw the hip bones together. So no bracing, no hard. Inhale. Exhale, let everything relax. And at the end of the exhale, very gently draw the hip bones together. Now I want you to come up your body a little bit more and think about the circle at the bottom of your rib cage. Now take a gentle breath into the circle at the bottom of the rib cage. Exhale, let everything relax first because that allows all the muscles to come back to rest. And at the end of the exhale, very gently draw the circle at the bottom of the rib cage together. And again, you're going to inhale into the circle at the bottom of the rib cage. Exhale, let everything relax. And at the end of the exhale, very gently draw the circle at the bottom of the rib cage together one more time. Inhale into the circle at the bottom of the rib cage. Exhale, let everything relax. And at the end of the exhale, gently draw the circle at the bottom of the rib cage together. Go ahead and relax, just do some gentle breathing. Now, what is connected to the bones are your pelvic floor muscles and your abdominal muscles. So if you don't want to know where your iliococcygeus and your pubococcygeus and your transverse abdominis and your internal and external obliques and all the rest of it are, all you need to know is that all of those muscles are connected to the bottom of the rib cage, in between the hip bones, into the sit bones. And when you draw those bones together, you're actually then bringing the muscles along for the ride. And what you're doing is you're connecting them gently. You're not bracing them, you're not over recruiting them or over activating them. And when you have a injury, which diastasis recti is, then you can't use your muscles optimally yet because they're not in the correct position. So just before we take some questions, I just want you to come back to that breathing sequence. I'm going to put it all together. So once again, just relax into your chair or wherever you are. And this time you're going to take the breath into all three of those points. So go ahead and take an inhale in between sit bones, hip bones, bottom of the rib cage, so your body's expanding. On the exhale, let everything relax. So all those muscles are coming back to rest. And at the end of the exhale, gently draw sit bones, hip bones, bottom of the rib cage together. And again, you're going to inhale in between sit bones, hip bones, rib cage. Exhale, let everything relax. And gently draw sit bones, hip bones, bottom of the rib cage together. And what I'm hoping you're feeling are your muscles coming along for the ride and starting to reconnect. And that's the first thing we do with the rehabilitation of a diastasis recti. And of course, we take it further from there. All right, I'm just going to look at some of the questions. Does anybody have any questions here?
Let's see, I don't know. Would people like to put a question in the chat? If you know how to locate the chat, you can just type in your question and Carolyne will answer it.
So one of the questions, while people are thinking about questions and stuff, I'm just going to talk about one more thing. Because we now know that diastasis recti is a fascial condition, and we know that the fascia connects the whole body. One of the questions I do get asked is my pelvic floor dysfunction, can my pelvic floor dysfunction be because I have a diastasis recti? And I'm going to say yes, it definitely can be. So if you've got a dysfunction somewhere in your body, then it can create a dysfunction somewhere else because it's all connected, especially pelvic floor and abdominals. That's just a whole piston or a whole canister, if you like, that works together. And so if there is a disruption somewhere in that unit, then there's going to be a disruption somewhere else. It's not for the rest of your life. It's like once you understand that you have a condition, there are things that you can do to rectify it. And if it means that you're going to stop running for a couple of months, then stop running for a couple of months because you can go back to it stronger afterwards. Okay, I know everybody gets so worried about the fact that we're never going to be able to do this again, and that's just simply not true. You absolutely can do whatever you want once you take care of this condition. You wouldn't run with a sprained ankle. Why would you run with an injury like diastasis recti? Because that's what it is. It's an injury to your body. Okay.
Excellent. I do not see any questions. So I think this group just has a lot of wisdom, or you did such a thorough job of explaining everything.
Well, I hope that.
We got one. Let's see.
Okay.
I'd like to know how your program works. Is it online? Oh, I guess, does she have to go to you in person, or are there online programs?
No. I think the pandemic did me a huge favor. It was actually a good thing for me. I know I can't speak for everybody, but it made me take all my programs online, and now I can retire. So I do have a home program. I've tried to make it as simple as possible. It follows our 4 pillars of success. So that's going to be a relaxation, a number of releases for your body, the realignment of your body, and then the restoration exercises. That's just your beginning. Okay, once you start getting into that and understanding a little bit more about your body, then you can go back to doing your regular exercise program. But that's all online on my website. Again, it's a generalized program. Understand that everybody is different and everybody's DR is different, but I've tried to make it so the program works for most people, which it does. Okay, we do have success.
And Carolyne, so how do we find your website? What is the exact search to put in?
So you can go on the gentlebirthproject.com. That's exactly what it is, or the centerforwomensfitness.com. I'm big on these really short names. So if you're a client, so I've just got some questions coming in. So if you're a teacher looking for a program for training your clients, then I would go to the Center for Women's Fitness. I have certification programs. So I have a whole program for diastasis recti, but I have pre and postnatal programs and menopausal programs as well. If you're a client looking for a home program, then I would go on the Gentle Birth Project that has an actual home program that you can buy. You have access forever. And I know one of my teachers is on here right now, and she's saying, it's an amazing program. Thank you. I'll send you a check in the mail. But yeah, so go on both those websites, see what it is that you want. If you want to become a teacher of the method, then the Center for Women's Fitness is where you should go. Yeah.
I'm not sure what Mona's question, what Mona was programmed for movement therapist. I'm not sure.
So
for professional, yeah,
like,
so Pilates
got it.
teachers and
yeah, so I have a whole Pilates program that's on the Center for Women's Fitness. So you can do it either as a fitness professional or you can do it as a Pilates instructor. But they're different modules, and everybody has to do the foundation courses, which is all the release work and the pelvic floor work. And then you can branch off into either Pilates or fitness. Okay, so we have 2 tracks for that.
Excellent. Got it.
Yeah. So any other questions for anyone? Goldie, do you have anything you'd like to ask me?
No, I'm just glad that you're out there and kind of making it a little bit easier for pregnant people and postpartum people to obtain, because as we talked about earlier, that I find, when I first started in my career, women were not aware of their bodies. And like you said, people who exercise more are more aware in general. And I find those were the clients that were like, what is this lump I see when I lift my head up? I get a dome, and what is going on? And I'm like, okay, well, that's just your muscles and your diastasis recti, and it's common, it happens, but we can fix it, you can take care of it.
Right.
And there used to be other techniques that were out there and kind of hard for women to try and follow and do. I think that you're kind of making it a little bit easier. And if they can't figure it out with you, they can always, move on to, see actually a physical therapist or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. See a physical therapist. Yeah. Like I said, I'm from the movement world, and I'm lucky that I get to see so many different clients and from all different backgrounds, and it's easier for me to reach these people, but I always refer out. It's so much better when you're working in collaboration with so many other people. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
I think we're all tied up like a bow.
Great. Good. Well, I thank you very much, Goldie, for asking me here and asking all these lovely questions and getting me on my way here, and Robin as well for coordinating this. And everyone who's sitting in here, thank you. I appreciate you being here.
Excellent. So happy you were able to do this for us. And thank you, Robin, for all your help. And have a good night, everybody.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Bye, Caroline.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Livia. Bye-bye.
Mhm.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.